for each component that we can use to build out this budget for 30 years. And the ultimate goal being that we want, my recommendation, the goal is to get you to 100% of that fully funded balance number at the end of the 30-year window. And so the 5%, sorry?
Can you review that calculation that you arrived at 403,000 just one more time?
Yeah. Let me actually.
Maybe just show us the numbers of where you got that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I thought it was on 16 where we had it. One of these. So that's the deterioration cost per year. So essentially, there it is. So
that 19?
Yeah, this starts on 18 actually. Just because the component list is lengthy, it goes into page 19. But this is where you can see the calculation for each component. And so it's just today's cost estimate in today's dollars, and then multiplied by that age factor that I discussed. And then we just sum it up at the bottom, and that's how we arrive at the 403,000. We do this because the goal of the reserve study is to speak to all of the predictable assets that have a predictable deterioration rate, i.e. a predictable useful life and a predictable remaining useful life. And so this figure, if we can kind of track the deterioration of these predictable components as a sum total, then we have a good idea of where we need to be in the future as we do projects and as things age in terms of being cash flow solvent, right? So that's kind of the goal of using this number as our goalpost for the 30-year window.
But are these lifespan estimates based on some historical data, or how are you determining whether it's what the useful life of something is?
The useful life is primarily dictated by our database averages. Just in the years that we've been doing reserve studies, we get a lot of feedback from vendors on certain things. And so we're just using the industry's best estimate for useful life. So all of those numbers we use just kind of as an average across the board. Obviously, some things can last a lot longer with good maintenance practices, whereas unpredictable events can shorten that useful life significantly. But again, we're trying to just use predictable numbers that are more or less agreed upon within each vendor industry for each component, and that's how we arrive at those.
Hey, Garrett, do you have a subtotal of the component categories? I know you break it out that way. Is there a quick way to kind of look at a subtotal for pages 18 and 19?
In terms of which one specifically?
Oh, I mean, you break it out within categories. So you got site, you got amenities, you got clubhouse, you got mechanicals, you got pool. Do you have a quick tally on the subtotals?
Oh, the fully funded balance for each area?
Yeah.
Oh, not really. What we would do in that situation is we would be considering each of those chapters as a separate cost center in order to do that. So because all of these fall under HOA responsibility and it's one cost center, they all kind of get included together so that we're tracking everything together, and then the overall recommendation captures every component.
Yeah, I just wondered, I mean, instead of, me having to add up all the line items under, each of the categories, just, look and see what the subtotal is for site and grounds. I mean, I don't know if you have that spreadsheet or something like that.
I mean, I could do it for you. It would just be kind of going line by line and adding them up. But I guess my question to you would be, is there something that fully funded balance for each chapter would kind of give you in terms of useful information, or?
No, just I'm interested. I'm curious to see, what the component breakdown of that fully funded list, how it breaks down.
I only ask because it's a good question, and it's just one of those things where we're trying to, again, use the average for all of these components individually. And so we've just found it more useful from an overall recommendation standpoint to just deal with the total. But I'll make a note, and that's actually something that might be useful for clients in the future, is to include something like that.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it real quick, I mean, it looks like site and grounds is probably the biggest dollars amount.
Maybe between clubhouse, if you included pool and spa with clubhouse, might be different, or it might be a little bit higher. But yeah, sites and grounds is a big one, primarily because of the extensive fencing all over the property.
The fencing, yeah, and the pool it looks like it's a lot of expenses with the pool as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so that's how we get the goalpost, that fully funded balance total. And then from there, we're just essentially running some software that brings us to the best recommendation to arrive at 100% funding. And so I call that the quote unquote worst case scenario. Because ideally we'd have 100% cash for all of our future projects and nothing would ever go wrong. So we give that value, which is the $119,000 a year, in order for the board to have the widest range possible of understanding of, where would we want to be in an ideal world, and then try and work towards some level of that. The alternate baseline funding that you see there is the same basic trajectory of funding as the full, but with the full, we've allowed for a minimum 10% cash flow margin throughout the 30-year window. With the baseline, what I did is I just dropped that down to as close to 0% without going negative as I could. And so between those two, that's kind of the quote unquote best window to exist in terms of annual contribution rate, in order to predictably stay above that $0 line.
So Garrett, if the recommendation is to fund it between the 99,000 and the 119,000 in 2022, and moving forward after that, for example, say if you did that, say if you fund it at 119, the next year, what would the next year recommendation be after that? I mean, is that something that you have kind of lined out in 23 and beyond?
Yeah. So what we did, we also for this report, I based a 3% increase annually. So it would start at 119 in 2022, and then every year after, I'm recommending 3% increases on top of that.
On top of the 119.
Yep.
Yeah.
But Garrett, that's only if we stay at current what the HOA owns, like not adding any additional amenities or fencing or anything along that, correct? Grounds.
Correct.
That's at what we currently have. That's under the Metro District for now, not any additional growth of the Metro District.
Correct. We have to use a like for like replacement. So unless there is maybe very firm plans for near future capital installations, like maybe a third playground or further fencing, we could put that in. But if it's kind of unknown what's going to happen in the near future, we step back and we just say, let's stay predictable with what we have. And then in the future, for any updates, when we add certain common assets, then future updates can accommodate those new assets.
Would it be best, as the HOA is growing or the Metro District is growing and taking on new assets, to have that 5-year funding plan come in with those assets?
In terms of, so do you have those now? Like, do you have the total expansion of where the master metro will be in terms of like?
So typically how we do this, Jason, is once we get this reserve study and everybody's comfortable with it and the board accepts it, we would do an annual update. So as the district accepts new assets, then we would come back to this and we would roll all of those accepted capital projects into one annual update. So it's kind of a growing document.
Okay, so it's not a static, hey, this is our one-time snapshot where we're at right now versus next year when we have second more from Oakwood into Erie Highlands, correct?
Right. Consider this as the starting point, and then we add to it as the district grows.
So for example, like next year around this time, we would ask Garrett to come back out and do a refresh and we're adding X amount of linear feet of fencing, and add
Yep.
that. So that gets added to this report, and then you recalculate the useful life of that component, I guess, and then recalculate everything else, and then you come up with a new number. Is that how you see it?
That's
Yep.
exactly right. From my end, at least. That's exactly what I would do.
Yeah, because what we would do is we'd take him to, say we accepted a new park, we would take him to the park so he could see what those components were. If we accepted new fencing, we would provide linear footage of that so he could factor all of those in.
So it should be done, preferably on an annual basis as you add more stuff and the life kind of decreases and so forth and so on, and there maybe replace some stuff here.
Yep.
And that's kind of our, in the reserve study industry, we recommend updating at least every 3 to 5 years. And that's just to catch up with, those ideas of, well, we might have something coming up in the next few years, but we couldn't put it into this year's study. And so 2-3 years down the line, we have a better picture on certain components and getting those updated to reflect all of the real work that was done. But if we're installing new ones, then yeah, maybe an annual visit would be would be better in terms of zeroing in on that full funded contribution rate. And truth be told, I wouldn't necessarily even need to come out again for another on-site inspection. If it kind of depends on what's getting installed and what the board feels comfortable. If you want me out there and another eye on it, absolutely, that's what we do. But we also offer a no site visit update where essentially the board would provide, hey, here's all the new fencing. We've added 1,000 linear feet. Here's also, we also replaced a couple of things in the clubhouse. We basically just go through the list, and then I do my updates from my office and send you the new report. So that's also an option as well. If we're planning on doing regular annual updates, just know that you don't need me out there every year unless you would prefer to. And then the other number on here that is kind of important, more so just for kind of a snapshot of the health of the reserve fund, is this percent funded. We include that just because we have found a strong correlation between percent funded and risk of special assessment in the near future. So being in that less than 30% category does carry a high risk of special assessment, but it's the same thing as a doctor looking at cholesterol levels. They're not telling you you're going to get a heart attack in 23 hours. They're just telling you, hey, we're seeing some signs of an issue and we should make steps to move past it. So that's why we include that number, just to kind of give a snapshot, and then using the report ultimately to get first maybe out of that 30% range, and then from there find a good stable contribution rate that works for the community.
Hey Jerry, what does $100,000 as a percentage of our total annual budget look like?
Good question. Let's see.
I guess that's maybe percentage of revenue or percentage of expenses, I guess. I don't know, get back to that.
It would be 13%.
So 13%, okay. Okay.
And that's the total budget, right, Jerry? So that's O&M and then our standing, everything total. As far as this piece, like what part of the budget would this actually, like the reserve and bringing money in to ensure maintenance and stuff like that, where would we kind of want to see that fall into budget items?
Not sure I totally understand your question, but that 13% is our total expenditures approved in the 2021 budget.
Trying to think how best to word this, but the items are like the 5-year cost study, the total cost of maintenance and ownership, like that usually just falls into our maintenance budget, correct? So as
Yes.
we're doing things, and then this 119,000 like to those contributions, those would be split both over maintenance and into a bucket to kind of maintain that, like that reserve money for, hey, when things kind of do break, correct? Like this would need to not be a new line item in the budget, but be a reserve for growth and replacement on the budget and that line item, correct? To get us up
Yeah,
to that
that's
100%.
it's kind of an accounting question. I mean, we can put it in a, one bucket, just a, capital reserve or replacement bucket, and then allocate it as needs arise. Or, if you want to go through the additional detail, we could have the accounting firms separate it out into the classifications that we have under our current expenditures. So we would have one, two, three, like 3 categories. It's just a matter of how you want to break it out visually on the existing budget.
And so honestly, that's kind of the short suite of where these are all the big numbers. The rest of the study is a lot of detail, graphs for the projections. I do want to, like we looked at kind of page 16, sorry, it was 18, for the fully funded balance. We also have this page starting on 20. The only difference with this table is we are actually trying to show that deterioration cost per year for each component, with the goal ultimately of also kind of hidden in the report of providing this, what we call the threshold funding value. So even lower than the 99,000, technically this should, account for all of the deterioration of every component. What it doesn't do is take into account the remaining useful lives for each. So that 9,000 difference is accounting for, well, we're actually going to have to do some concrete work next year, and then maybe some asphalt sealing after. But if we're just looking for a baseline, or I shouldn't say baseline, threshold value, that can be found here on page 21.
Jerry, did you review the useful life, or do you have any comments, any questions in terms of like, does it make sense? Is everything kind of in line with what you see?
Yeah, I mean, I did review it. There was a couple of places where I was just kind of questioning. One being the amenities. You've got a playground cover with a useful life of 10 years, and then the playground equipment with a useful life of 25. That seemed a little off, but I understand the methodology that Garrett uses, and it's pretty consistent with what we've done in other communities on reserve studies. One of the other items that I highlighted was the clubhouse siding has a useful life of 60 years. I think that's probably too much. I don't think I've seen a useful life over 50 for any component in a development.
That's our wood siding for the Denver area. It's
okay,
and it's a good question because again, we're talking averages, and so if you want me to lower that, I'm more than happy to. We only go up to a max of 50 in the mountains for siding, just because we see more damage events there. But that's totally within the possibility of a revision. If we want to lower a useful life, just because we're worried about it, then we can go ahead and make it 45 or 50 years.
Yeah, and I understand that it's driven off what type of material you use. So, I mean, we all understand that wood siding is not all created equal. I mean, there's different materials within the family of wood siding that have different useful lives, but I don't think this particular study gets down into that type of detail. But we can certainly make, as Garrett said, we can make changes if we can. If we just take a look and say, oh, we know that's not accurate.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of why we come back every 3 to 5 years on the updates is, boards learn new things, all the particulars of their community as time goes on. And so this should be a living document that we kind of come back to and tweak when we realize that, well, precedence has said that we're actually doing more concrete work, but less asphalt sealing just based on our history. And so that's the power of doing updates on these, is we hone
Yeah,
in
I mean, the whole idea of this is to come up with realistic numbers that give us a framework. And if we start playing with it, we've defeated the whole purpose.
Well, I wanted, Sam, I think my questions are, Jerry has a lot of good history in terms of, the facilities, and he knows the communities, and he's been doing this for a very long time. So I'd like Jerry to, make sure that in his eyes, the useful life and the calculations are appropriate and accurate, and if there's something that is like, if whatever, like a space heater that, oh, this thing's going to go in like a year, like, we should, identify that instead of 15 years or something like that, just to make sure that, Jerry and his team are kind of commenting on, I guess, the appropriateness of some of these calculations. And if there's anything that needs to be adjusted, because he knows he knows the systems, he knows the communities in that regard.
Yeah, and that's kind of why we wanted to have this meeting, is just to get it in front of everybody. And then what we would do is we will go through it line by line. And if there's any adjustments, then we will provide this working group with what our recommendations are for those adjustments. And then if everybody agrees on that, that's when we basically finalize this study and present it to the board for acceptance.
So one question I had, and I don't have enough directly in front of me, so I'm just using your screen share on it. So I see it goes through. It has the lines in there for like the irrigation clocks and those pieces, but it doesn't have anything for the common areas for the landscaping. Is what if I remember correctly. I'm trying to.
So landscaping is one of those items that's kind of difficult to handle in reserve studies because off of our National Reserve Study standards, 2 of our 4 tests that we use to determine if it should go in as a component for funding is predictable useful life and predictable remaining useful life. And so I can include things if the board has says, hey, we've already experienced this amount of money coming out every 2-3 years on major refurbishment. We can use precedents. But beyond that, even an irrigation vendor, unless there's an issue today that they can scope and bid out work for, even they'll say, well, you might get 20, you might get 30 years out of an irrigation system or landscaping. Trees fall under that category where it depends on a lot of unpredictable factors, whether that tree is going to last 100 years or 20 years. Yep. And so that's the only issue we run into with things like landscaping or even like retaining walls, engineered products that are meant to last for, 80 to 100 years. But that's why you're not seeing landscaping as a funded component. Okay. But the irrigation clocks are something that we can cycle for on a fairly regular average.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's one of our issues as well, is that for our landscaping budget, it's kind of been hard to nail down. So like replacing mulch, replacing vapor barrier, like the lifelong experience of vapor barrier, the average life of a tree in a community our size. Like I know that while yes, it has a wide range of what the tree should live, but hey, in Colorado we know that things happen, hail happens, it kills smaller trees. Like anything along those lines would kind of be helpful to have in there as a guide for yearly expectations of maybe $5,000 a year for tree replacements if it needed to be done based upon our historical values. And vapor barrier, hey, we know that we have really bad issues in certain areas or things on that piece, or what you've seen in the communities, what you've kind of seen on that side of it to have for expectations.
Yeah, and it's if the board decides that they want to include something, I would call it an allowance. At that stage, then I can totally put it in. It would be called out that the costs and life cycle were supplied from your end. The only thing that we run into being, I don't live there and I don't have the experience that you do. So from a predictable asset, I just have to go off of those things that I can grab easily and kind of make a judgment call that I can stand by. Whereas if I speak for your trees, I may get it wildly inaccurate and therefore, it throws off the budgeting tool. But if during this revision process, we decide, hey, let's do 10,000 every 5 years for tree removal and replacement, awesome. I'll put that in, call it out as a client provided all of the costing information. And then that's another item that we go by, every 3 to 5 years on updates. is this an accurate figure? Have we been spending that much? And we can adjust up or down as we go forward.
And are these just replacement costs? Like, does it include like the fencing right there? Like, does it include any cleaning costs or anything along those lines that would have to be included over the years, or this is only the cost of replacement when it's no longer relevant? So
This is just replacement for these, because these are all vinyl fences, I believe, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So with cleaning, we would recommend putting that just under a general operating or maintenance budget, kind of an as needed. But again, if it's something where you've already experienced a lot of money going towards just cleaning those fences, then that may be something where we need to discuss another allowance for something like that. But in general, those are the types of things that we would say, deal with them as needed on an annual basis, and therefore just keep it in the operating side of things. Any other general questions, or even specific ones, I should say? I shouldn't limit us.
I'll let the others provide any comment there. Okay. I think that let's talk about next steps if we could. So next steps would be, Jerry, as you mentioned, doing that review, I guess, from the district management side, seeing if there's any recommendations or any comments, I guess, from your perspective in terms of useful life, or I don't know if you would get into cost estimates or not, but maybe useful life and just the calculations, and see if you're feel it's appropriate, and then present that back. And obviously Sam or Jason, if you have any comments on that as well, feel free to provide that to Jerry. In terms of, I guess, your perspective, if you have any thoughts on that too. And then it'll be put into a final form, and the final form will be, basically provided to the boards for approval. And then, we would take that, approve it, and it'd be a document that we would use in the budgeting process moving forward. And then that's where we talk about.
That was my question, Brandon, is when does the budgeting process start that we would have to kind of have this all ready to go by?
Jerry, you want to speak to the timing of the budget?
Yeah, typically budget season is mid-September to mid-October. So
okay,
we can get this.
We've got basically the month of August to play with.
Yep.
And I will just mention that our revision window is usually 60 days after the report was posted. So that would bring us to just about the end of August for that. If we need a little more time, just let me know. But that way, I can get that document and then just go line by line and bust out those revisions.
Yep. Well, what may be helpful and kind of streamline things is, Jerry, your revisions on that piece. If we could just have you review, make your recommendations for revision, shoot this out with Garrett and CC us on it. As a group, do we want to say, yes, we want to include landscaping items on this, or do we want to put a pin in that and just have that as a separate item on the budget to know for upcoming cost?
Landscape maintenance is really difficult. I mean, it just what Garrett was saying earlier, it's unpredictable. I mean, if you have, there's hailstorms, there's hard freezes, there's low snow, totals, there's high snow totals. It's just, you're dealing with weather. Anytime you deal with weather, it's really hard to quantify and, stick a number to it, because it's constantly changing. So it's kind of a target that you're never going to hit.
No problem. I will take your best advice on that, Jerry. So if you say it's best not to have included here, and that we just call that out and make sure we stick by it when we do our budgeting season, because I know that's been one that we've kind of been hard for a little bit. But if we can, we'll go with your best recommendation on that, and send off what you think for revisions, shoot it back, CC for email. I think will probably be the easiest way. Once you say good, Jerry, we can get the board meeting scheduled, the group board meeting for ratification and approval of it, and kind of go from there. That way it's.
Yeah, I don't think we need a separate board meeting. I think what we need to do is, as a group, I think you can accept it, and then we can ratify it at a regularly scheduled meeting to save some
Okay.
money.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that'd be wonderful. So yeah, then balls in your court, Jerry. If you just want to do back and forth emails with Garrett, and then have us on the CC line once the final one's set up and gone, we can probably just, if Brendan, you're good with it, I'm good with saying, hey, it looks good in email, and we'll use that for our budgeting season, and let Jerry and Shelby kind of run with it from there.
Yeah, and that's where the decisions will be vetted out, I guess, with the budget discussions and the workshops that we'll have. I mean, what can we do and how much can we fund? I mean, what are we comfortable funding? How much revenue do we have coming in? What are our expenses, I guess, for the next year? And that's when that kind of rubber hits the road.
Yep.
All right. So it sounds like we have our next steps. So Jerry and Garrett, this will be in your court. I'm assuming that'll pretty be. It sounds like you don't have a ton, Jerry, to kind of bounce off with Garrett. So I'm assuming it'll be a pretty quick process, hopefully, and we'll go from there. Garrett, I definitely much appreciate your time walking through this and doing the study and helping us understand where we're at.
Before we break, maybe we can, let Garrett go. And I apologize, I wasn't able to make the meeting that we had scheduled for a couple days ago, and my meeting ran way longer than expected. So my apologies for missing that last one. But maybe we can catch up for like maybe 2 minutes or so, or a few minutes.
Yep. That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I did the Zoom meeting, so I don't know if if I leave, it may kick y'all off.
Yeah, I was
So-
gonna say.
It's okay. I can, Brittany, if I create a Zoom and send it out, will that be good enough?
Yeah, that works.
Can you just leave it open maybe for a minute or two, or is that
Okay.
okay, Garrett?
Leave it. Yeah,
Well,
You can get your camera off and.
oh no, I think Garrett, you can click on one of us and make us a co-presenter or a co-host, and then when you disconnect, it'll keep us connected.
oh, good.
Try that.
So, and that's you, Jason, right?
Sure, yeah, that'll be fine.
I'm glad you're so tech savvy, Jason.
Oh, I live
I didn't know if you becoming the host would still keep my meeting open, but
Yep,
it'll be
yep.
a good experiment.
It should. If not, I can shoot one out. Yeah, I live in Zoom all day, every day, unfortunately.
The new normal. No, thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
yeah,
Garrett.
These are all about making sure you guys have a good product that you can feel comfortable going forward with. So I'm happy to do the revision and then give you guys a good foot to start off on.
Thanks,
you,
Garrett.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thanks, Garrett.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You too.
Bye.
Hey, we're all still here.
Yep.
Hey, nice work, Jay. All right. Well, again, apologies, I couldn't make that last one. I thought I was giving myself a little bit more time in terms of, changing to 3:45, but my meeting ran way longer than expected. So my apologies.
And I didn't even have the meeting on my calendar, so you're way better than I am. Greg.
No, I'm not. At least you have a good excuse, right? Okay, so quick kind of follow-up from the earlier meeting this week. So maybe Jerry, if you want to give us a quick brief. I understand that we got one proposal from CLA, and there's a few others that didn't have enough time to get back to us. So maybe any
Yeah,
other
I mean, we sent it out to 3 firms. 2 firms communicated with us the day it was due that they did not have time to devote to it, so that they were not going to submit. CLA submitted 30 minutes after the deadline, but this group can waive that if you are so inclined. CLA's proposal was within a range of $7,500 to $8,000 to perform this study.
And what's the time frame on them being able to deliver with the budgeting process hanging over our heads?
Their timing was to deliver by the end of August.
Okay, then that works.
What, and Jerry, did you speak with the other 2 folks, and if they had another week, would they be able to provide something, or they just said no, thank you?
I sent them an email asking them. I haven't heard back from them.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
And I guess the biggest question is, if we go with CLA for this process, the $8,000 to cover it, it wasn't in the current budget. Where could we kind of poke to find those funds? Would be the next logical question, I would assume. Correct, Jerry?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jared, do you see anything in terms of our current budget right now where we are have any contingencies or saving any dollars, any line items? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
At this point, we're pretty tight all the way up and down. Yeah, I mean, that's a big number. I don't see a free $8,000 on any line item that's coming in, drastically under budget at this point. I mean, we can keep our eyes on it as we progress, but we slimmed this budget down as low as we could go last season.
Yeah, we slimmed it down. Then we had the extra pool expenses, and already killed the lights and a couple other items, I think, didn't we, Jerry?
Yep.
This year.
And the
Yep.
year's not over yet.
Right.
Nope.
And we had a brutal snow season, so we're already high on that.
Well,
And
I mean, that is a
brutal
pretty,
irrigation.
I'm sorry, say again, Brittany.
It's a bit of a brutal irrigation system as well. So
Yeah.
Gotcha. I think it's very important to move forward on having a study like this. I was hoping to have a couple other responses back. Maybe if, Jerry, maybe if you can, give one more call out to the other two folks, kind of last call, give them another, to the end of the week, next week, if they're willing to do that, or just get a response back and see. But I think it's really important to do this study so that we can analyze where we should be, on a stabilized ongoing basis, and where we need to be, and what does that mean. So, I don't know about your opinion, Sam and Jason, but I think this is kind of a key item. And in terms of the budget, we can analyze, if there are any savings throughout the year. But I think that we can also ask the developer in Oakwood Homes, if they're willing to participate in some of that too, to establish this fee study. So comments, Jason, Sam?
Yeah, my only concern is if we give too much time for the others to respond, knowing that we're so close to August, if that's going to delay us if we do still pick CLA if the others do not respond.
Yeah,
if we give
Jason
that
took
time.
the words out of my mouth, and it's critical. I mean, look, we're in a world of hurt, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon.
I mean, I would prefer someone other than our accountant kind of doing it, just to have that separation of study there. But if knowing our timeliness, that's definitely kind of hurting us. And I would love to have additional calls, because I do feel like that is a high number as well. I'll lean on you, Brandon, based upon working with the budget in the past years, working with the multiple metros that you've kind of done with, and seeing what you feel best as far as, like, do you think it'd be, for knowing what we are against time structure, like, do you feel it's best to have that additional week leeway in there for the other groups to respond, or should we hit the ground running with CLA? And I'll kind of let you weigh that out, since you do have more experience in that piece than I do.
Sure. So a couple comments. I think that the group is different than the accounting group. So they have a different group, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a different department within CLA. So it wouldn't be, I don't think it would be Shelby actually doing it. She might provide some context to it, but maybe Jerry can confirm that. But it's a different group that would be doing that, I believe.
Yeah, it is. Shelby would just be providing sources of data that she has.
Yeah. So I don't know if that kind of answers that question, or kind of responds to that point, Jason. But my other question, Jerry, what was the cost that TST? What was their cost for doing the carriage house fee study? 5,000-6,000?
I don't know. Let's see.
Or was that paid through by Oakwood?
No, I don't think it was paid by Oakwood. Are you talking about Thompson River or Erie?
Well, either really. I mean, what was TST's kind of?
Give me a minute and I'll look it up.
Okay. Because I guess my question is, I mean, $7,500, $8,000 is, certainly a big dollar amount, but I think it's within reasonable range of other studies. It might be a little higher, a couple $1,000s higher perhaps, but I'm not like to kind of check on that. But I do believe it's pretty key to have a study that we can rely on to, to look at, what should we be doing moving forward. So Jason or Sam, I mean, would you agree that we should be doing this in terms of the study? As we
Well, I think it's critical, because if we're going to go at some point and either mill or assess or do something, we've got to be able to justify it. And without this kind of data, we're just, that we're forcing the homeowners to rely on our word.
Yeah.
And I think that's a much harder sell.
Yeah, that's my thoughts too. Yeah.
So it doesn't, that particular invoice might be in for processing right now.
Okay. Well,
So, I mean, we can look it up and I can send it out to the group just so you have something to compare the 75 to 8,000 to.
yeah. Maybe if you could do that real quick, and then maybe just give one last call out to the two other firms and check in with them to see.
Okay.
Otherwise, I suggest and I'd recommend that we move forward with CLA, and then if we need to fund it through another source, we can request that that item be funded perhaps through the developer. I would have to check.
Okay. Yeah, I'll dig that cost up, send it out to the group, and then contact the other two firms and see if one more week if they could make a commitment to get us something.
Okay.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay. Well, let us know, Jerry, if you do get feedback from the other two folks.
Okay. Yep. We'll do.
All right. Again, sorry I couldn't make the meeting on Wednesday, but my apologies here. All right. Well, you guys, I think that's it for now, but I appreciate your time and have a great rest of the day. Great weekend.
No problem, Brandon. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
And I appreciated the reminder very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.